the boot that carried more than weight. Picture this. Somewhere in the waterlogged hell of the Western Front, a young soldier laces up his M1917 trench boot in the grey pre-dawn light. The mud around him is alive. It pulls, it swallows, it remembers every man who has walked through it. The air smells of wet leather, sulphur, and something colder than cold. And tucked beneath the inner sole of that boot, folded to the size of a playing card, is a letter. A love letter. Written in pencil, soft from handling, carried thousands of miles from home. This is the story of how survival and the human heart became inseparable, and honestly, what that means for every modern Fieldcraft practitioner watching today. Built for the mud, carried for the soul. The M1917 trench boot was an engineering response to one of history's most brutal environments. Its thick double-layered leather rose above the ankle, its hobnailed sole gripped frozen duckboards, and its waxed seams resisted constant saturation. Soldiers stood for days in flooded conditions, where trench foot could claim a man's toes within 48 hours. But Fieldcraft is never purely mechanical. The rigid toe box and removable inner sole created, almost accidentally, a small sanctuary of private space. Into that space went folded photographs, prayer cards, and love letters, pressed flat and carried silently against the foot of men who needed reminding why they were enduring the unendurable. The trenches classroom. What the Western Front demanded above all else was improvisation. Shelters were built from scavenged timber and sandbags, waterproofed with rendered animal fat. Soldiers learned to read the landscape like experienced bushcrafters read a forest, identifying natural drainage, sniper exposure, and morning sun angles. Fire discipline was absolute. Men developed shallow tin stoves vented through trench walls, burning compressed sawdust when fuel ran short. Clean water was filtered through improvised charcoal and gravel systems. Food rations were extended with foraged roots, and whatever the shattered landscape reluctantly offered. This was adaptive survival at its rawest, and it honestly mirrors every core principle of modern wilderness preparedness. Camouflage, hygiene, and holding the line. Individual concealment, well, it reached remarkable sophistication. Mud was applied deliberately to helmets, to break up the silhouette. Grass was woven into burlap, creating primitive ghillie suits. Soldiers in listening posts would lie motionless in no man's land for hours, reading enemy patterns through sound alone. Meanwhile, hygiene became its own battleground. Lice were combated with candle flames run along uniform seams, a ritual that, strangely enough, became almost meditative. Feet were rubbed with whale oil each morning, and socks were traded like currency. Morale was anchored through micro-rituals, carved mess kits, photographs pinned inside helmet liners, and letters tucked beneath boot soles, carrying warmth from another world. The soldiers of the First World War did not call their situation a survival scenario. It simply was life. What they built from that pressure was a living body of practical knowledge, water filtration, improvised shelter, food extension, camouflage, and the irreplaceable power of morale as a survival tool. The love letter in the boot was not sentimental. It was functional. Purpose, connection, and the will to return home are not soft concepts. They are, in fact, the core of every long-duration survival mindset. When you lace your boots before heading into the field today, you carry forward a lineage of resilience forged in mud and wire a century ago. If this episode gave you something worth carrying, Subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with someone who values history, self-reliance, and the timeless art of survival. These stories deserve to stay alive, and so does the knowledge inside them.